And we're live. Well, hello, ladies, gentlemen, extraterrestrials, hobbits, and cryptids, to another episode of the Fall Channel. So, tonight is a little bit of a special episode since tonight is Valentine's Day. Or Valentine's night, depending on what you think of it. So, tonight's episode is science fiction romance, Love in the Stars. So, I figured we would cover this topic. I think I lost a subscriber when I announced this episode, which I thought was kind of funny. But other than that, um, we will be discussing this and more. We may not go for the entire usual hour we typically do here on the channel, um, but we'll see, and it depends. But ideally, we'll go for a good minute and kind of dive into different films, books, TV shows that have either been science fiction romances or have had it as a significant part of their series design. So even if the show, film or video or film, TV or book isn't necessarily marketed as a straight romance, it at least has a little romantic flair to it. So we'll be kind of diving a little bit into that too over the course of tonight's episode. But either way, we I think it's a really good timed episode considering the fact that yes, I just got married on Wednesday, February 5th. So that was not this past Wednesday, but the Wednesday before. So I've been married for almost 10 days, starting tomorrow. And it's kind of crazy. It's a different type of paradigm. Um, we got together 4 years ago. She was from San Diego or studying in San Diego. She's actually from Central California. And yeah, now we are in Item. We've returned to San Diego for my pursuit of a master's degree, and she went to this school here in San Diego for a degree in architecture. So it's very interesting how San Diego has sort of won me over in very many respects. Probably because I feel like it has no real fictional identity like New York or LA do. So, and I see that as an opportunity, and I might do that a little bit in my own work here on this channel to kind of showcase a side of San Diego that you don't often really see. So I think that'll be a fun exercise to do. So I did ask ChatGPT what it thought was some notable science fiction romances, and I'm going to add a few of my own. Typically, I don't like to include too much AI into the festivities, but at the moment, the audience that we have is relatively small, so it's really more for the benefit of you folks listening in the future. So, um, either way, this channel is not a AI scam channel. This channel is strictly a channel that kind of explores science fiction themes in real life, and then kind of you know plays with them a little bit. We discovered through this year's or last year's great AI experiment that the text to video um, aspects of like in video AI and things like that don't really work. So at least not to the specs that I do. So maybe there'll come a time where AI has sort of not replaced the human or the capacity for human thought and creativity. I don't think we're ever going to get to a point where it ever surpasses the human capacity for creativity, but because I feel like humans have more intuitive, decision making when it comes to creative expression. I feel like when you are creative and you do something a certain way, and it's the only way that you would have did that thing, the AI has no concept of that. So, speaking of AI, we will be discussing, oddly enough, some of the options that ChatGPT has generated. And again, I will bring up some stuff that I think was interesting that isn't based on what this thing thinks. So I lean pro AI. I mean, I'm not one to like dismiss it out of hand. I think that's foolhardy and anti-technology, like Ludditism, and I don't agree with it. There's literally an entire book series about a Butlerian jihad. Like that isn't what you should be taking away from doing. Like the Butlerian jihad turned their society into basically a fiefdom, where all these imperial feudalists, houses were fighting each other. So I don't think that is an aspiration to hope for. I think that that's insane to think that we want that to happen. There should be no AI bans at all. There should be some prohibition on it to ensure that people are protected from people using it or misusing it and trying to scam people. That's certainly a thing that we should all be protected against. I mean, we're seeing it every day with people posting nonsense books on Amazon to make a quick buck. So, um, that is concerning. I've even seen it beyond just actual books. I've seen it be people who've generated entire coloring books and stuff of that nature just to make a quick buck, and that kind of thing leaves a sour taste in my mouth. And that to me is what is stealing people's jobs. Like that is the thing we should all be fighting against, not just the very idea of AI. I think, like, again, AI is just a tool. We use it, we're misuse it at our own peril. So with that, we talk about the film Her. Now, I can't talk much about it because I never saw it. Her came out in 2013. I did see a trailer for it, so I know it's about basically Scarlett Johansson plays like an Alexa or Siri type artificial intelligence, and this guy played by Joaquin Phoenix basically falls in love with it. And there's a question about how much of it is actually an actual real genuine connection and how much of it isn't. And I think that kind of just plays into the great themes that science fiction has always explored. And I personally believe that science fiction is at its best when it explores the themes in that way. So if anyone has seen Her, let me know what you thought of it. And yeah, I might check it out at some point very soon. Now, some of the ones I did see are also on this list. The Shape of Water. So that one I thought was pretty good. That one's kind of a science fiction romance with a little bit of minor horror sprinkled in for good measure, as only Guillermo del Toro can provide. That one's basically like a romance between a mute woman and an amphibious humanoid, and no, it's pretty good. I mean, I believe it did win the Oscar that year. Was it 2018? I think that was like the first like science fiction film to win that award, and then just a few years later, Everything Everywhere All at Once followed in its footsteps. And both of those films, as far as science fiction Academy Award winning films go, they're really small in scope, but they cover so much and they're rich thematically. And I think that you can pull that and explore some of the ideas that those films provide. And I think it goes to show that you don't need to make like a fucking $1 billion you know revenue at the box office or spend $200 million to make a film that's going to be you know a tenth what these films ended up doing. So in The Shape of Water, I mean, I felt like it was a genuine connection film. I mean, you don't even have any dialogue between the two of them. They just have this connection, and it's kind of fascinating to watch. And that's having a mute woman and then this amphibian humanoid who don't really talk to each other, but communicate and like fall in love through just like action and visuals is quite amazing. I think it makes me wonder how you can kind of explore these ideas with that sort of a scope. Because I mean, a film like that could easily be watched in almost any language because you don't have to have that as a barrier to entry. So I mean, I think that's genius. And yeah, I really like that film. I think that I need to rewatch it at some point soon. The other one that's on this list is also the thumbnail for this video, or comes from this video, or comes from this film. So it's Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. And I saw this one many moons ago. I think I saw it in a film class once. And Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is a rather unique film. It's very weird, very surreal. So it definitely, it's probably why I gravitated toward it. But there's a larger conversation about how when you fall in love with someone and then you want to get those like a bad ex removed from your memory. I mean, something about that is very like prescient, like something a lot of people, I imagine, would. I've never wanted to erase the memories of my exes. I felt like all of those experiences enriched me. I feel like anything that's bad in your life, you can always either make it your master or turn it around and make something positive out of it. So that's kind of how I've always approached it. But yeah, that film kind of speaks to a larger issue that I think a lot of films don't really cover, which is, if you could erase a person like your ex from your mind and your memory, and you still kind of fall into the same sort of like loops that you had done in the first relationship, you still get together. That kind of thing is sort of fascinating because, I mean, are we all doomed to the same loops? Are we all doomed to the same poor decision making? Or does it really have an opportunity for, maybe doing it a little bit better this time? I don't know. But I think it's very, very timeless as a concept. And I think that the fact that it's a film that doesn't provide too many easy answers is something I appreciate. Because there isn't anything worse than having a film that gives you easy answers, at least in my opinion. So beyond that, we also have Gattaca, which is one of my favorite films, if not my all-time. You can also refer back to an AI-generated video I did on this channel where I talked about the top 10 science fiction films, and Gattaca is on that list. So with that, that's obviously sort of a love story set in a dystopian world of genetic engineering where a sort of eugenics is going on, where only the perfect, valid people are able to, contribute to society in some meaningful way. And then everyone else who's quote unquote normal, they have the opportunity, or rather the misfortune of having to live, normal everyday lives. And I think that that's kind of emblematic of a larger issue in our society where, um, advancements in technology and science can improve life in a variety of ways, but in some of the ways that I think it matters the most, it can sometimes fuel discrimination and prejudice in ways that we hadn't foreseen before. And I think there's something important to be said about that. But beyond that, you have this is the film that Uma Thurman and Ethan Hawke basically probably traded Maya Hawke out of. At least that's my theory. But yeah, no, I think it's an actual, genuine, solid love story because I feel like, when she learns that he's basically been lying the whole time, but he hasn't really lied. He's just been, borrowing the ladder, as they say in the film. Because in the film, you are pretty much destined to, be locked into these predetermined social statuses because you're either valid or invalid by the general society. And for her, she fell in love with Ethan Hawke's character, who he goes by Eugene, or he goes by because Eugene is Jude Law's character, and Jerome is Ethan Hawke's character, but his real name is Vincent. And in that film, she falls in love with him because he's actually himself. The only difference is that he's had to work a little bit harder to get what he wants and to achieve his dream. And there's something in that that I think is very empowering and something that I feel is um, something that actually is emblematic of a society that we would like to think of as a meritocracy. And I think that that's pretty solid theming, if you ask me. And Irene, Uma Thurman's character, they fall in love, and yeah, he finds a reason to stay instead of having a reason to flee the Earth and go to Titan for this year-long space mission. So, on the one hand, he'll have somebody to come back to, but on the other hand, he won't have Eugene to depend on anymore. And there's something about their love story being something of a you know loving something flaws and all, and looking past someone's imperfections, because she also has a heart defect that Ethan Hawke's character is supposed to have, and despite both of those issues, they can still kind of contribute to this larger project. And I think that there's something beautiful in that. I think I recommend Gattaca. The film Passengers is a film from 2016, and it's about a romance between two people who wake up too early on a spaceship. However, um, how that comes about is a little interesting, considering the fact that one is woken up due to the actions of the other, and there's kind of an ethical quandary between those concepts. But I remember watching a video. I think Nerdwriter did a video about how Passengers is actually a horror film, or should be rewritten as a horror film. Because I mean, in general, it is kind of horrific. I mean, you kind of have Chris Pratt's character in the film reawaken Jennifer Lawrence's character, and she's basically doomed to the same fate as he is. And yeah, that kind of, I think, shades the romance in a way. Because I mean, yeah, she falls in love with who he is, but the circumstances behind her reawakening is a little problematic for, I think, most of us. Because I mean, ultimately, she woke him up and had him, or she woke him up, or he woke her up, and then he was basically trying to write it off as just another mechanical malfunction, when in fact that wasn't the case. So um, there's an ethical boundary that I think kind of shades the relationship a little bit, and then they kind of do learn to kind of coexist and then eventually fall back in love with each other. But getting back to that is a little suspect, even for me. But I would never tell anyone not to watch a film because I didn't like it or whatever opinion I have. I would suggest you watch it and then let me know what you thought, and then we can have a conversation about it. I would love to have a conversation about Passengers. There's some things that I like. There's some things in it that I think would have benefited from more expansion, especially a certain actor's role in the film. And that's why I don't think Passengers is a good enough romantic film, at least in the traditional sense. So there's that. But yeah, I don't know about forcing someone to stay awake with you to pass the time is a romantic gesture, but maybe I'm just behind the times. I don't know. The Time Traveler's Wife, that came out in 2009. I did watch this film. I think it was my mom who watched it. And I think the idea was that there's a guy with a genetic disorder that causes him to time travel, and it causes him to struggle to maintain his relationship. And I think this is the one with Eric Bana and Rachel McAdams, if I'm not mistaken. And that film is definitely more of a romance because, I mean, we follow their lives, I think, for 10, 20 years, and how everything kind of works out for them because, he has this ability to, like get lotto numbers, go back in time, and then like change the outcome of their lives. Even though I guess the film has kind of a time loop because they do find out that at some point he does have to make a time jump back to the past, and essentially ensure that his fate still happens the same way that it should. And yeah, there's something about that I find pretty interesting. But yeah, it's that's more of a timeline that exists in a loop. So certain decisions have to happen in order to have the same outcome. But um, the romance in there seems genuine. I don't think it's too bad. There's some moments where I think the moments I think are suspect is moments like they go and they depend on him and his lottery numbers to sort of get out of the situation that they find themselves in at home because I think it's like on the verge of poverty, and I think them winning the lottery because now they have the foresight to use time travel as a means to learn the numbers and then play those numbers. So I think that that's a little weird, but overall, um, it's not bad. It's okay. It's a good time if you have a significant other. So I think I'd recommend that for if you have a partner or someone you want to watch something with. Um, Maybe I'll have to watch that with my wife at some point. But anyway, the next film I recommend is a film called Upside Down. I have not seen it, so I will not discuss it much further. I also didn't see Her, but I did see the trailer. I haven't seen anything for this one. But the next film on the list is Interstellar. So Interstellar is one of my favorite films of the last maybe 20 years. Um, One of my favorites. Um, it's not a romantic film, but one of the central themes of the film is this idea that love is a literal transcendent force in the universe. And yeah, it plays in two different directions because you have the first plot line where Cooper, Matthew McConaughey's character, he is trying to sort of use love as a transcendent force to communicate with his daughter, who's sort of removed by time. And then Amelia Brand, played by Anne Hathaway, she was in love with somebody who was on another space mission, and we find out at the end of the film that he did not make it, but she was still kind of like driven across the universe to, meet somebody she loved. But when she meets him, he's ultimately didn't make it, and so there's that kind of tragic moment. And I think that yeah, there's something to be said about that that I think is pretty tragic in itself. But that's that whole theme of love being a transcendent force. I think is more of a metaphor in real life than actual. It's more of a poetic sentiment rather than an actual thing we can measure with scientific rigor. So, but overall, I do recommend Interstellar. Now we have Alita: Battle Angel, which does have a romantic subplot, but I've only ever seen the film in snippets. And maybe I did watch it all in one go at one point, but I didn't think it was that bad. But um, I don't know. I feel like I need to watch that more intently than I have. But apparently, it's a cyberpunk love story between a resurrected cyborg and a street kid. Now, there is another film that I can talk about. This will be the last film that we'll discuss, and then we'll probably move on to TV shows. But yeah, Wally. Now, Wally is essentially a beautifully animated love story between two robots exploring the fate of humanity. And I do love this film. It's a very cute film. And, you have a little robot, Wally, who's sort of a, I don't know what you want to call it, sort of a hopeless romantic. And, he's watching old films and kind of yearning for some kind of connection, some kind of love or attraction to something or someone. And in this film, he finds Eve. And yeah, it's very cute. I recommend Wally. And yeah, we have a Wally wax heating machine thing. I forget what it's called. But yeah, no, here at our place, Wally is definitely part of our little mythos. I think we actually have a Wally Funko Pop. We do. So there's that. But yeah, that one's a very genuine love story that I think also works because it isn't heavily important. It isn't that important to have the dialogue be there. So, you know, I think you can watch it in almost any language as well. So I recommend it. But in terms of science fiction romance and the thematic elements. I mean, we've kind of explored a little bit of it with these 10 films. And even though we haven't been able to talk about all the films because I haven't seen all the films, but I do think there's something interesting that kind of carries its way through all of the films. And that's using the themes of science fiction to kind of talk about love in a way that you couldn't do in, say, I don't know, a mystery or horror or fantasy. So, I mean, there's that. Um, but yeah, I think we'll move on to television shows. One of the ones on this list that was created is Doctor Who. And I have tried, trust me, I have tried to get into Doctor Who, and it has just never worked. And maybe I'm just misjudging it or something, but it's just never been something I could get into. And I have no problem with British television. I mean, I love a lot of different British television series, but for whatever reason, this just doesn't work for me. Doctor Who is just very, very hard for me to not to understand, but it's just hard for me to sort of dive into and think of as like something watchable. I don't know. It's always been really bizarre, and I love Space 1999, and that's like to me the quintessential science fiction television show. And it kind of blows my mind that in the 70s you would have had Space 1999, and then you would have had Doctor Who playing around the same time, and having two completely different experiences. But I mean, that is what happens when you are working on some sort of a project like that. So it's par for the course. But one of the other ones that's on this list too is one that I can speak to because I was a big fan of the show, still am a big fan of the show. Fringe. So Fringe is a sci-fi television show that's got a procedural bent with an emotional romance at its core. Now the romance is very slow, steady state because it grows through like two seasons and then it culminates in the third, and it kind of stays at that plateau for the rest of the season because it's pretty solid. It's built. It's got a strong foundation. It just goes to some really, really solid places. I think that I don't agree with some people who say the romance is the weakest part of it. I think that just is the perspective of people who don't know how to experience love or romance or attraction. So, I mean, they can disagree all they want with me, but I think that's a valid critique of those sorts of people. And one of the people I do want to mention who did make that opinion, I'll be discussing him at some point this weekend. But either way, um, yeah, Fringe, you have Anna Torv's character, Olivia Dunham, and then you have Joshua Jackson's character, Peter Bishop. And a lot of things happen between the two of them. They're kind of at odds at first, but they kind of become attracted to each other. And then over the course of like the first two seasons, yeah, they actually end up falling in love with each other. And it's pretty good. It's pretty heartfelt and pretty amazing. And I would recommend Fringe if you guys haven't watched it. But one thing I don't think I'll put on this list is the X Files, because the X Files isn't really a romance. It has the what they call in the screenwriting world Erst, which is unresolved sexual tension between the two leads. And periodically, it has manifested into like an actual like sexual relationship or a romantic relationship, but it kind of goes back and forth in ways that I just don't think qualifies for the criteria on this list. So I will not be mentioning the X Files. At least I don't think so. We won't be. But before we continue, we'll be moving on to our sponsorship minute. So give me a minute to thank our sponsors and pay the bills. So our podcast and channel are brought to you by the Vega Aerospace Corporation. Vega Aerospace, in space. No one can hear you. So we'll continue on with our detailing of science fiction romance. And we'll be continuing on with our television series discussion. So, the next one in our list is The Expanse. So, The Expanse first started about 10 years ago. Jesus Christ. 2015 to 2022. I can't believe it's been off for that long. There's a lot of romances in this series, even some polyamorous style relationships that are explored in The Expanse. So they're covering a lot more ground. There's same-sex romances. There's all kinds of romances, and I think they're all very interesting and unique. One of the ones that I think is notable is between the two primary characters, Naomi and Holden. So I think that that romance is pretty solid, and where it goes ultimately, I think, is also pretty good and tragic. But I'm curious to see if they pick it up in a few years and attempt to complete it. I think that they might go to some interesting spots. But it's not. I wouldn't consider it necessarily a romance series. It's definitely like kind of a peripheral concept with it. But yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly ways you can do that that work. But yeah, so beyond that, we have Star Trek: The Next Generation, where you have a couple of different romances. You have Jean-Luc Picard and Beverly Crusher, who I think have a constant will they or won't they sort of relationship. And then you have Deanna Troi and Commander Riker's relationship that eventually turns into not only a romance but a marriage and eventually a family. So there is that, and I think that how that goes is pretty cool. Again, Star Trek: The Next Generation is not a romance science fiction story, but we're kind of looking at science fiction stories that have romance in them. And we'll expand it out a bit. If anybody has any recommendations beyond just the ones I mentioned here, you're more than welcome to provide the receipts, and then we can explore those in possibly a later video. So we'll continue on further. So I think the best science fiction romance on television, ever rendered on television, was in Black Mirror, specifically the episode San Junipero. And that's actually one of my favorite episodes. Um, Strictly because you have these it's a same-sex relationship, but it's between two women, and I don't know, it's very poignant, very beautiful, and yeah, I think anybody who watches it and has a muted reaction to it, they're not serious people, or they're just kind of love lost, and I think that's sad. um, I recommend you watch the Black Mirror episode San Junipero tonight, even if you'd like. I think it's that good. You can find Black Mirror on Netflix. The next thing on our list is called Sense8. Now, I've never seen this one, so I can't speak to it. Though I've heard some things about it, and I really can't speak to those things that I've heard about it. So, if you've seen it and you like it, definitely let me know, and let me know why you'd recommend it. The next one on our list is Firefly. And yeah, I think I can see this, because we have sort of a slow burn relationship between Malcolm Reynolds and Inara, and then sort of a sweet little romance between Wash and Zoe. And I love Firefly, always will. And Serenity, obviously that relationship, changes slightly because you have what happens to Wash happen, and then I think the only criticism I have about Serenity as a film is that it really does sort of dampen the relationship between Mal and Inara, and I think that isn't what they should have gone with. But again, they can only do what they can with the amount of time they had. So I guess I should just be thankful for that. But either way, I think I would have loved to have seen how that relationship flourished and continued. And I hope one day we do get some type of a continuation of Firefly or Serenity. So another one on our list that I can't really speak to is Futurama. I know that I know I've seen many episodes, but I haven't seen all of them, so I can't speak to the majority of it. But there's a heartfelt love story between Philip J. Fry and Leela, and one of these days I got to sit down and watch the whole thing. I think that'd be cool. Also, the Orville. Now, the Orville has some interesting ideas when it comes to love stories. Because I mean, really, there's love stories all over the thing. I mean, you have Seth MacFarlane's character, and then Adrienne Palicki's his wife, and then you have that one where his friend Gordon goes back in time, falls in love with this 21st century girl, and then something to be said about that. And again, I haven't seen the last season, so don't spoil me on that one. But I think that these romances should get more time to develop, more time to flourish, more time to kind of to sit. And I think that would be cool. I think that that works for me because I think that romance can work. Because I mean, to me, there's five facets of life that are indistinguishable genre-wise from anything else. Because any one story can have any one of these five elements, and that's action, adventure, comedy, drama, romance. All of those can be in just about anything, and it'd be fine. But to classify something as just one of those things is kind of wacky to me. But you know, it has been done. I mean, there's action films, there's adventure films, there's comedy films, drama films, and romance films. So I mean, it can certainly be done. But I feel like if you're telling a story and you want to kind of explore the entire gamut, um, there's you know the gamut of human history of human experience really is those three sort of ideas, at least as far as I'm concerned. So I hope we can dive into that a little bit as time goes on. But beyond that, Altered Carbon is another one that this list has placed on the list. But I can't speak to it. I only saw the first episode of it, so I don't know where anything goes with it. In regards to several books, the books that are brought up here are rather interesting. The Left Hand of Darkness by Ursula K. Le Guin. And that's a novel that explores love and gender in a unique alien culture. But the thing about the Left Hand of Darkness is that I have not read it, although I do intend to read more Ursula K. Le Guin and explore a lot of the world building in all of her stories on this channel at some point in the future. Excuse me. So the next item on this list is the Time Traveler's Wife, and this is the book of the movie that we mentioned, and that's described here as a emotional take on time displaced romance. So I think that's an interesting perspective for this to have. Again, I have not read this one. The Space Between Worlds, a multi-universal romance with themes of identity. So also have not read. The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet by Becky Chambers. A heartwarming, character-driven space opera with romance. So I have heard of this one. I do want to read it. The Night Circus by Erin Morgenstern. So this one, while more of a fantasy than sci-fi, it's kind of a dreamlike setting that feels otherworldly. And I have read this one, and I need to read it again. It's been maybe 7 years since I read it for a sci-fi class, and yeah, I wanted to dive back into that one, and I might explore that here on the channel. We'll see. Kindred by Octavia Butler, a time travel romance with historical depth. I love Octavia Butler, and I'll be exploring a lot of her stories and world building here on the channel. I'm currently reading Dawn. It's part of the Lilith's Brood series by Octavia Butler, and what I'm finding so far is a lot of interesting concepts, even exploring the alien species that comes to rescue the eponymous character Lilith. Yeah, and that one, the Onankali, the aliens that they run into, they have a completely entirely different social structure and view of romance. So I think that's an interesting kind of concept to explore, just as a world building idea. Oh, excuse me. So beyond that, we have This Is How You Lose the Time War by Amal Elmotar and Max Gladstone. I have not read this one, but it is a poetic and tragic love story between time-traveling agents from opposing sides. So it does sound interesting, doesn't it? The Host by Stephanie Meyer. Now, Stephanie Meyer is an author that I will not read willingly, and I have read at least the first Twilight. I've also read the fan fiction spin-off that became 50 Shades of Grey. I've read all three of those books, unfortunately, to get laid, and did not work. I do not recommend reading anything under the false pretenses of trying to get laid on anything. So learn from my lesson. But other than that, The Host did get turned into a film, and it's about a love triangle where one body hosts two consciousnesses. So I don't know. I can't really speak to it since I did not read it, and I've only seen the trailer for the movie. Hyperion by Dan Simmons. Now Hyperion's a great story, and at one point I do want to cover it here on the channel. It involves multiple interconnected stories, including a deeply moving romance. So we'll dive into that one at some point. I think the romance will be part of the discussion. I do want to finish that series. I haven't gotten around to it just yet, but at some point I do plan to. So there's that. You'll definitely find out soon if I do. And the last one on our list is A Closed and Common Orbit by Becky Chambers, explores an AI's journey to understanding love and identity. So I think these are all great options that the old AI recommended, but I think I have a few ideas of my own that I want to kind of dive into for the next few minutes. So one of my favorite films is science fiction, Contact. Now, Contact was written as a book at first by Carl Sagan, the famed science communicator. And they turned it into a film in 1997, the year of our Lord, which we will be exploring as well as an idea. Because I do believe that 1997 was one of the greatest years in cinema, but not for the reasons that all of us may agree with, but it's definitely touched a lot of people who were born around my time. I mean, the late 80s, early 90s, I think would probably get more nostalgic for that year more so than they think. So we'll dive into that at some point. But yeah, Contact is a film where the central romance between Jodie Foster's character and Matthew McConaughey returns, or rather, this is in his first outing as a science fiction sort of character. And in Contact, you literally have their romance is sort of a metaphor for this greater discussion about how science and religion are somewhat at odds, but there is a way to sort of reconcile the two, especially since in the book it's a little different, but in the movie, she goes back, or she travels through this wormhole network that's spread across the galaxy, perhaps, if not the universe, and she finds her dad, at least in the movie, on this beach, which is supposed to be Pensacola, Florida. So she drew a picture when she was younger, and that's what they're creating as a projection from her mind. And that's an element of love that's in the film. This episode isn't about just love; it's about the concept of romance in any film. And again, at the end of the film, they've kind of reconciled, and they've gotten to this point where, um, you know, she's asking the world to kind of take her on faith that she went on this cosmic journey through the stars to meet her dad. And a lot of people don't believe her, but she's asking everyone to believe her. And she kind of pursues a sort of semi-quasi atheistic perspective that I think is sort of interesting from that kind of a lens. I'm taking a science fiction class right now where we're kind of exploring the idea of, what have we ever really been human? And I think it's an interesting premise. But yeah, for me, in regards to this book and film, you have this sort of exploration of, this push and pull between religion and science. And oftentimes, religion has funded a lot of scientific projects in a bizarre kind of roundabout way. Um, beyond that, this push and pull between faith and our faith in science is an interesting one. And I think that both the book and the film could or do explore these concepts in a really mature way. And I think that I would disagree with some people on the science fiction podcast with Damian Walter, where they kind of think that this sort of push and pull is a little bit more flimsy than we should give it credit for, and I don't necessarily agree. I might be putting it a little bit, might be minimizing that slightly, but either way, um, I think that it's fine as a story, as a concept. So, in terms of TV shows, I'm trying to think of some off the top of my head. So I wouldn't really, I don't know. Sometimes romance can come in different forms. Sometimes romance can be very trying, can be very fraught with conflict, very fraught with danger. And so, that's not a mark of a bad story if it does do that. But periodically, you'll see that, and you'll kind of explore it a little bit. In terms of TV shows, the one I'd want to mention is the anime and manga called Planetes. Now, Planetes is a hard science fiction story, basically about working class people kind of working in space to get rid of space junk. And it's kind of a novel, crazy idea because I mean, ultimately, you have these like trash men, and trash women, working on these projects to get rid of the space junk. But in that, you have a rather like heartfelt love story between main character Hachirota Hoshino and Ai Tanabe. And it's actually, I think, one of the best romances ever rendered in science fiction. And I think, at least in the anime, it's rendered a lot more earnestly and authentically. Uh, in the manga, it's a little bit more complicated. It's a little more rough, but I think it still works and functions well. And I recommend that you all check out Planetos. In terms of books, I have woefully, that's not, I wouldn't say avoided science fiction romance as a genre at the bookstore, but I haven't gone out of my way to read much science fiction romance. And I think a lot of it is because I think there's this perception that something that's romance based is going to be less, um, quality than something like a science fiction story that is just, straight science fiction. And I think there is a place to be created and offered by science fiction that allows romance to foster. And I don't think, getting rid of romance from any genre is wise because I think that fiction is at its best when you have people who are pursuing things that humans pursue, like romance or love or sex. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that it's perfect when you write something that uh, carries on from human experience. And I think there's a lot of fans in the fandom that kind of don't understand that, and I feel like they think that romance is sort of a less of a genre than like other parts of the franchise or other parts of the storytelling genres. And I think that is a full that is a foolhardy perspective, and I think that needs to change. And I think that it is changing in kind of surprising ways. Maybe not universally, but it is changing. And I think you're seeing this too with the emergence of something like romantasy as a genre. So it's a romantic fantasy stories, and I think you'll see more of those coming out because I think the top two genres that are selling a lot is literally fantasy and romance and fantasy make the most money at the bookstore. And science fiction typically is usually, I think, in the lower third in terms of revenue as a genre, and that's why if you're not like a specialty science fiction periodical, you're not really going to cover it that much. But even then, it's sort of interesting to see. But yeah, I mean, this romantasy genre. I mean, you even see it as a marketing category. I mean, I think it's doing pretty damn well. Because I mean, Barnes and Noble has a whole section dedicated to it. I see it on Book Talk all the time. I see it on BookTube periodically. So I mean, it's everywhere, and I don't think it's going anywhere anytime soon. Especially since I think there's a real strong um, thirst for it, and there's a desire to have those stories be told. So that's one of the things that keeps genres going, and will probably continue to keep doing that for the foreseeable future. So keep that in mind. But without any further ado, I think we'll dive into a few of our plans for the next few episodes and podcast items that we'll explore soon. So, again, this was the science fiction romance episode. So, Love in the Stars. I hope that everyone is able to enjoy their night and go home with their loved ones. And yeah, find love in the stars. So, beyond that, I will leave you with this thought for this episode, and we'll move on to our next topics. So, there might be a romantic concept that I explore in a few of my novels, especially in the Explorer Saga. And I hope that that doesn't turn you off. I still hope you tune in, and if anything else, it becomes something aspirational for you. But I feel like a lot of romance today is sort of buffeted by two movements that are kind of brushing past each other in very toxic ways. Um, I think there's a radical feminist movement that I'm talking about the radical feminists that exclude trans people. That's the movement that I have the issue with, and they tend to be just as bad as the red pill ideology folks that tend to brush past them. So, I mean, for both of them, there's a war on masculinity and a war on feminism, and I think both of them need to kind of, you know, outrage is what's fueling these things, and there's a perception among men that they, if they do anything, they're going to get like targeted as some kind of predator. And I think this kind of segues into the topic of my next episode on the channel, and we'll get to that in a moment. But ultimately, if we're not talking to each other and the genders become further bifurcated, we're going to end up in a society where um, some real dark shit can happen. And I don't think either side, at least the ones that are more dogmatic about the ideas, realize this. Because ultimately, they're coming at this situation from more of a selfish point of view and not from one that benefits all of society. Because at a certain point, it becomes vengeful and less productive to do any of it. And I think that that's probably by design most of the time. So I think that's part of the problem. Um, Man hating or even woman hating, these ideas are stupid. And now gender, does get moved out a bit, and people constantly have arguments about it. But I think, um, sex is not what's the argument. It's gender because sex is biologically determined. Gender is a social construct. So it's whatever we present ourselves as, and they don't seem to get the idea that gender can be a socially constructed concept. And I think it's pretty fascinating when I talk to people who don't seem to get that. But yeah, I mean, they like to call back to science and say that these things run against popular science, which is, I think, probably true because in the popular consciousness, men are supposed to have all the power and the women are supposed to be subservient to them. And I don't think that that is true or has ever been true. But society is trying to reassert it as an idea. And I think it's mostly because there's a cottage industry built up around it. So maybe I'm just a hopeless romantic myself, but I think that there's nothing wrong with women having power, women having agency, and women having solid quality love stories that are emblematic of the human experience. I think we need to have more of those. And I definitely think science fiction has a place for romance, and I believe that it can be in almost any story. Any story that reflects the human condition is always going to be a great story. And I hope that it does still inspire writers and readers to keep the genre going. At least that's my hope. But either way, um, let's dive into what else we have planned on the channel. So, some point this weekend, I haven't decided when, we're going to address a rather large elephant in the room, and that elephant in the room is the allegations that Naomi King has expressed toward Daniel B. Green, the noted science fiction and fantasy author and YouTuber. And I was subscribed to him, still am subscribed to him. Um, I believe, I've never believed in the idea that we should believe all women. I think that there are people out there who do lie. But I do believe wholeheartedly that we need to take all allegations seriously. And in the case of Neil Gaiman and the case of Daniel B. Green, in the court of public opinion, they are now guilty. However, they are still innocent until proven guilty. But that still does not change the fact that these allegations are damning, especially since Daniel B. Green, at multiple occasions, has posted videos. And, just the other day, I think yesterday, posted a video that was probably the most transparent and fakest video I've ever seen. And I will explore this video more in depth at some point during the weekend, because I feel like this video is egregious. He even admits to having a sexual relationship with Naomi King, and they do not deserve to be treated that way. And I think her allegations, at least as far as I'm concerned, lean more towards the truth than his. And I think that's damning of him. So I'm curious to see what he comes up with as a recourse. But he plans to sue plans to sue them for that. And I think that is wholly wrong. And I think that it just speaks to or their point that he is trying to attack her and get away with it. I mean, literally in the legal document that was presented to Naomi King, they said that he basically hired some kind of random, like, really shitty lawyer and had them draft up a legal document that was basically not proofread, because I mean they called him a medical professional, and I think that's the wildest thing to happen out of this whole thing. Everything else doesn't surprise me. It's disappointing, but unfortunately not surprising. And I think that it just kind of emboldens the idea that male feminists are the problem. And yeah, unfortunately, this is just another thing to happen that kind of reinforces that idea. And it's a shame. But yeah, that's where we're left at that point. And it's a shame. It's a true shame. I honestly hoped better for him, but I should have known better as a person whose general default setting is on not trusting anyone at any given time. So yeah, I'll adjust that this weekend. We'll explore that a little bit more. There's also some other episodes I want to explore where I want to explore other less controversial topics. Today I did watch Captain America, Brave New World. I'll be posting a short video because I don't do reviews on this channel, but I'll be posting a short video on Wednesday, kind of reviewing it a little bit, but also exploring a concept I heard in the lamestream media, that it's kind of a film that's made to sort of criticize MAGA in some way, and I kind of disagree. But we'll kind of dive into that in that short film, or that short video, on Wednesday. But yeah, Monday, look out for another post in the community tab Friday, we'll do another live stream. I'm still working on what the topic will be, kind of circling the wagons on some ideas. Because I do want to kind of dive into 1997 as like this whole year of great film. And then I kind of want to explore a bit more of the sort of sci-fi I grew up with. We'll go decade by decade and explore specific stories that I think are interesting or that I want to highlight. That I don't think that they're getting as much love now that so much time has gone on. So I hope you tune into those, and I hope that you stick with the channel. We did just hit our 100th, subscriber, and that's a great moment. And I do want to do a video dedicated to that. I think most likely we'll be covering that sort of as a concept or a celebration next week. So um, I'll let you guys know, and we'll kind of explore that when the time comes. But other than that, this has been the Science Fiction Romance episode, Love in the Stars. And I hope you kind of got ideas or will take some of these recommendations to heart. So beyond that, yeah, it's always fun to hop on these live streams and explore these wild, crazy topics and see how the genre is evolving through time. So I hope you stay tuned and don't forget your towel. And yeah, ultimately, don't panic because, yeah, life's too short. But until next time, so long and thanks for all the fish.